Hello and welcome to Season 3 of Family Twist, a podcast about DNA surprises, found family, and amazing adoption stories. I'm Kendall Austin Stulse, and my partner is Corey Stulse. We've had fabulous guests during Seasons 1 and 2.
We're sharing stories of people who identify as NPEs, also called not parent expected, others who found out they were donor conceived and have surprise siblings, and even others with unique family twists. We started this podcast to spotlight Kendall's adoption story and his discovering both sides of his biological family in 2017. So if you're just finding the podcast, we encourage you to start with episode 1 to learn more about Kendall's journey.
Thank you for listening. Welcome back to Family Twist. It's our finale for Season 3. We can't believe it.
We've been doing this for about a year and a half, and it's just wild that we've already been through 3 seasons. Season 4 starts a week from today.
We were so lucky this season again to have such great guests and feedback from you, the listeners. And we were really happy that 8 of our guests have left us voicemails. We're going to play those for you today. First up is Ryan Pesavento.
Corey and Kendall, this is Ryan Pesavento. It was so excellent being able to work with you and share my story. You guys helped get it out to more people, and that's really what I'm about, is sharing my story and spreading all of these stories that you have helped show. So thank you very much for having me on. It was a pleasure.
And Ryan is the first guest that we've had who identifies as non-binary. It's when we're talking about Ryan's chosen pronouns are they, them. And so really happy to have Ryan on. Ryan was actually a 2-time guest this season. And what I think I admire so much about Ryan is just how much they have reached out to new half-siblings that they've found, really welcoming them to the found siblings into this very unique family situation, that the donor father of all of these half-siblings is helpful with information and things, but really doesn't have the type of relationship that we've heard other donors have with these adult children that they find.
Ryan has formed a really strong, close relationship with one of their half-sisters. And in fact, Ryan was part of her wedding ceremony earlier this summer. That's why we had them on a second time, because Ryan took a really interesting vacation where they met several siblings for the first time. Ryan is continuing to plan their vacations around meeting new siblings, which I think is awesome.
First, Ryan's getting to see different places that they've never been, but also getting to connect with these half-siblings and get great photos and spend some real personal time with these half-siblings. We just think it's wonderful. Next up is Michelle Toulier.
Hi, this is Michelle Toulier from the Season 3 episode, Guess What? My Dad is Not My Dad. I had so much fun talking with Kendall and Corey about my DNA surprise. We talked about the discovery that the father I'd known all my life was not my biological father. And we talked about how that sent my identity into a tailspin as I began to feel so untethered from everything I'd known about who I am. What amazed me about the experience you guys created for me as a guest was that your really friendly, down-to-earth manner made the experience so easy and enjoyable. But there were also some really serious questions that made me think and that brought up some deep emotions. So it was a very meaningful experience for me, and I thank you for that. I loved being a guest on the Family Twist podcast, and I can't wait to hear what's in store for us listeners in Season 4. Thank you.
Kendall said something to me recently that I found very interesting, that this season, the theme seems to be secrets. And I think actually the podcast theme is starting to become more and more about secrets and about how you can't really keep these kind of family secrets anymore. Michelle found out later in life that the man who raised her was not her bio dad. In fact, it turned out to be somebody that she knew her entire life, a family friend who also had kids. She kind of grew up around her half siblings, just had no idea that was the case. It's a pretty remarkable stories.
Next up is G. McLeod, and on NPE Awareness Day, June 27th, we aired the episode with Gene.
Hi, Corey and Kendall. This is Gene McLeod. I appeared on the No One Knew My True Parentage episode, and I enjoyed being a guest on your show and you guys allowing me to tell my story. You guys have a terrific platform for found family and adoption stories. You both are very good interviewers. You ask terrific questions. I look forward to speaking to you again when I get a publication date for my upcoming book, Intersections. Keep up the great work.
Gene's story is really interesting because neither his mother and father who raised him knew that the man who raised him was not his biological father. Barbara Lane is next.
Hello, Corey and Kendall. Barbara Lane here. I'd just like to say for your project that Family Twist provides such a platform for individuals to understand a variety of things. Number one, to feel that they're not alone when they learn something about ancestry or families, lost families, histories uncovered that could be unsettling or relieving. And Family Twist allows a platform for me to have told my story in a way that I felt like provided some closure for myself and hopefully for those who listened to it. I'm so grateful to Corey and Kendall for what they do and for having given me the opportunity to share my story of myself and my 10 sisters and our reunion and our unique family twist. Thank you so much.
We do find a lot of coincidences when we speak to guests. Barbara's stories actually started in St. Louis, which is where I am from. So we had to do the old, where'd you go to high school conversation, which if you're from St. Louis, that's pretty much the first question people ask you. Her story was wild. She was one of 11 girls, all from the same mother, and all of them got separated. It was, her mother had some issues, and they all reunited later in life. And there's great photos of all of them together. It's just, a really heartwarming story that they were all able to reconnect after so many years.
And the fact that Barbara, when she was in foster care as a teenager, as a child and teenager, she was placed with mafia bosses. And so, bizarre part of the story. It's really interesting. You have to go back and listen to Barbara.
Dana Foster was also kind enough to leave us a really sweet voicemail.
Hi, this is Dana Foster, and I was a guest on in season 3, and I just wanted to say how much I appreciate being able to tell my story. And I'm so glad that Corey and Kendall reached out to me and asked me to share my story, finding my DNA half siblings and being able to establish a relationship with one of my half brothers. So you all do such fantastic work, and I really, really look forward to hearing future stories of your other guests. Again, thanks for asking me to tell my story. Keep up the good work, guys.
We connected with Dana, on a different level, I think, because, we're gay, she's married, lives in Florida, but she is doing her part to make sure that legislation goes the right way in Florida because it's a little bit backward right now. I found Dana from a local article that someone had written about her because she had some really interesting DNA findings when she did a DNA test, and it's really made a big impact on her life.
Next up is Ed DeGangi.
Corey and Kendall, this is Ed DeGangi from episode 51 of the Family Twist podcast. I just wanted to one more time tell you what a good time I had recording with the two of you a little while back and how enjoyable it was this week to hear the podcast go live and then relive that conversation. When I set off in search of my birth mother's identity and then subsequently wrote my book, The Gift Best Given, I just had no idea how many people I would meet who were kind and generous and enthusiastic about the story. And I count you among them who have made your acquaintance, and I remain a listener of your podcast. And hopefully, that the story progresses a little bit further. There's a new twist. I'll give you a call, and maybe we'll record again.
We have a lot of guests who write books about their stories, which is great. I think it's important to get this information out there in whatever way you can, be it a podcast or a book. So Ed found out, again, later in life, that seems to be a trend, that he did not know who his birth mother was. And through some interesting detective work, he found out that she was actually a very prominent figure skater, very well known. And one of the cool things about his story is that, it's pretty rare to have memorabilia, we're talking about going back to the 30s and 40s, and he was able to find a collector who had posters that his mother was on. And when he met up with them, they just handed them over. So these belong to you. This isn't ours. This is a part of your history. So here you go. I thought that was really cool.
Hey, Corey and Kendall, this is John Dame. I was with you on an episode of this season's podcast. I really enjoyed being part of your podcast. Some of the stories I've heard are really, really enlightening. I hope I can come back again sometime soon. And if there's anybody out there who has not yet seen my movie Filling in the Blanks, I hope they get a chance to watch it. It's definitely right up the alley of a family twist podcast listener. There's no question about that. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope your dogs are doing well. And I look forward to maybe being on your podcast at some point in the future, and maybe even meeting you face to face when I'm up in that part of the country at some point. I hope you guys have a good fall, and we'll be in touch.
So next I'm going to talk about John Boehm, who has a really cool documentary out right now, which he just mentioned in the voicemail that you heard. Really, really fun to talk to him. Another NPE, and he interviews a lot of his half-siblings and talks about, their journeys in his documentary. It's really, really well done.
Wow. Last but definitely not least, we had the really cool experience of speaking to the triplets. They are not the only siblings in their family, but they were donor conceived, split up at birth. Well, two of the sisters stayed together and one didn't. And then they reconnected as teenagers and now all live in the same city. So they purposefully relocated to be close to each other.
Hey, Kendall and Corey, this is Jules. I just wanted to call and say thank you guys so much. 2023 have brought us so many kind of unexpected blessings, and definitely meeting you two tops that list, both for your podcast and the interview that you guys did for ours. You guys are just so easy to talk to, so warm and so kind, and I'm sure that everyone in both of your lives is so proud to be able to know and love you. I hope we see you guys soon, and congratulations on an amazing season.
And we just felt a real kinship with them. Their names are Ricky, Jules, and Kendall, believe it or not, another Kendall, who sometimes goes by Kenny. And we really enjoyed the time we spent with them. They gave us a lot of material for our podcast. And then we were lucky enough to be on their podcast, which is called Luke, Who Is Your Father?
We started this season off with a Kendall-centric episode, again, about family secrets. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you probably know that Kendall has not connected with his birth mother, even though he and his half-brother, Chris, found out who she is 6 years ago. It's been an ongoing traumatic experience for Kendall, to say the least.
It is. And I had written a letter to her that I don't know that she would ever read if it were put into her hands. But what I did on the first episode of this season was read that letter in the hopes that somebody in her life, I don't want to put the pressure on my sisters to do it, but somebody in her life would say, hey, Jackie, you should listen to this, And even if I don't get a response from her. I just hope she hears it at some point. And as Corey mentioned, it's a continual struggle for me, I think. And sometimes I get fixated on it a bit too much. So, but it's therapeutic for me to do what I did and for Corey and me to continue to talk about it. And we talk about it. If you think you hear about it a lot on air, you can only imagine how much Corey hears about it in the household. It's just this ongoing, lingering desire that I have to, what child wouldn't want to know his parent, right? At some level, I don't even ask my sisters, and they don't volunteer a lot, but I don't ask them a lot of information about her because it feels painful even, to talk about her at some level. So maybe that will change. I'm going to spend a week with my sister Stephanie in December, and I'm hoping she and I have time to spend talking about our mother. I don't really know much about her life, and again, I'm not blaming my sisters. They feel awkward, I think, talking about it with me. So I'm going to be open, and I want to hear what Stephanie will tell me about my biological mother, and looking forward to it.
So season 4 will start a week from this episode's publication date. And I'm not exaggerating. We've already been recording several episodes, and wow, I mean, the stories that we're hearing are just like jaw dropping. Our first guest next week gave us some really interesting perspective on the whole concept of family rejection. I think it was actually very therapeutic for Kendall. We both were teared up during the conversation, but it was, I think, very, very helpful. We're really thankful that so many of you are finding the podcast, subscribing to it. We've really seen the audience grow over this season. We love this community of, people with family twists.
I feel really connected to this community now. I think when we started this podcast, I had no idea how much I needed to hear people's stories. I needed to hear other adoptees whose experiences many times have not been as good as mine were. People who weren't told they were adopted and found out later in life, and these NPEs, not parent expected events that happen. It's just traumatic. And I feel so fortunate that I was never in that situation, but I feel such kinship to the people who have gone through those moments. Not only adoptees, but these donor conceived children who have been lied to all of their lives. When I hear these stories about the parents who gave birth to these donor conceived children and continued to lie to them even when the children had health concerns and needed to know that they were donor conceived and still weren't told. I just I don't have a lot of empathy for those parents. Like, that is not the right decision to make ever. Your child deserves to know that the parent that they thought raised them is not their biological parent. They deserve to know that, but they also need to know because of health concerns. I can't believe when parents hold back that information. I feel exactly the same way about people, in where they could have had open adoptions and chose not to, or have lied to their children their entire lives about their, situation, the way that they were born. I wish I had a dime for the number of times that I've been asked throughout my life until I found my biological family, what's your family history when it comes to medical concerns? And of course, I knew nothing. And it's irresponsible, I think, for closed adoptions to continue. I do, I think. And I'm not blaming my adoptive parents for going that route. where they lived, that was the only option, right? That was the law. So it wasn't as if they had another choice. And they didn't care in that if if I had been ill, they were still gonna love me and they were still gonna take care of me. So that's not the point. The point is, as I became older and I started thinking, "Oh, should I be watching, for diabetes? Should I be watching for a heart condition?" These are questions that I couldn't answer. And I just think it's irresponsible for anybody in this day and age to think that that's okay.
Absolutely. And, it's not too late for parents to let the secret out. It's time. The trauma that it's causing you and your child, that can all go away. And there's definitely room for healing, for sure. And so, that said, I really want to say how much we appreciate our guests for their bravery and coming on and telling their stories.
People can be really private about these things. I have nothing to hide and there'd be no reason for me to hold back. So, my story's my story and mine is quite good compared to some others. I mean, it's funny how people will always have sympathy for me when they find out that, my adopted parents died so young. 'Cause I don't discredit that, but at the same time, in that short time that I have with them, they made a forever mark on my soul and I love them dearly. And so, you know, would I choose to have them longer? Of course, but I still am glad that those are the parents that I ended up with. Thank you so much for listening. Season 3 has been a blast. And again, thanks to the guests who were able to leave these messages for us and, helps us commemorate their stories more.
Thank you so much for listening to Family Twist. We feature original music by Cosmic Afterthoughts. And Family Twist is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications. Check out our website at familytwistpodcast.com for blog posts and all of our episodes.